As marketers, myself included, we're continually challenged with making compromises when it comes to balancing targeting, granularity, and audience scale. And what we found is lookalike modeling has emerged as a proven and effective strategy for taking some of the guesswork out of audience expansion. And I'm really excited to be moderating this discussion today. And we'll be joined by a couple of subject matter experts, thought leaders, who will be driving the content of the webinar today. So a quick look at the agenda. We'll definitely go through an overview of lookalike modeling, really tease out 5 top things to look for when you're considering lookalike modeling for your targeting strategy, how to get started, quick demo of what it looks like in the Lookalike UI today, and obviously add some color in terms of how this has impacted customers in the real world, and then open it up for a live Q&A. Quick intro into our thought leaders today. So Molly Parr joins us as Director of Product Marketing from Oracle Lookalike. She has led all GTM activities for the Lookalike data management platform for the last 3.5 years, most recently incorporated into the Oracle Marketing Cloud. Then we have James. James is the CEO of Prud'homme, a company that has been leading the charge on lookalike technologies, specifically as it relates to real-time adaptive machine learning. So very geeky but super exciting stuff that his company has done with Lookalike and now Oracle. With that, I'm going to pass the baton over to Molly.
Thanks, Rowena. So to get us started today, we wanted to talk a little bit about the Lookalike application within the Lookalike platform and why are customers using it and what problems it helps them solve. So to look at Lookalike modeling, how did this come about as an offering within the platform? Customers came to us and said, we're using first-party data and we're able to effectively remarket with it. We're using third-party data and we're using it for prospecting. And there's a gap in the middle. I'm not doing anything customized outside of my retargeting, and there's a whole bunch of data that's available to me in the third-party realm that I might be able to use. And so Lookalike fulfills that middle gap where a customer can come to us and say, I have a desired outcome such as converters, bookers, buyers, and I'm able to create a Lookalike model off of those users. And it is as simple as it sounds. A Lookalike model is a group of users that look like those customers who are your desired KPI. So again, buyers, bookers, converters. You'll see in the demo that it's totally customizable. To speak to a little bit of what we look at with a Lookalike modeler within the system, and isolating on Datacratics, who has worked with us for over 1.5 years to perfect the Lookalike modeling process and ultimately the workflow that you'll see today. We have a couple of important core tenets to what you should be looking for in terms of the modeling system and how your model should perform. So first and foremost, Datacratics is fully integrated within the Lookalike user interface. There's an easy to get started workflow. It can be done in 2 simple steps, and we'll demo that for you today. It's multivariant. So this is probably the most notable point in terms of how Datacratics approaches Lookalike modeling. There's a lot of modeling happening out there in the ecosystem, in the industry, that is single variant, which means it's simply categories correlated against an event. Multivariant means it's actually assessing all of the attributes on a given user and identifying the best users who look the most like your desired KPI. It also takes into account additional attributes such as recency and frequency. So it's a very multidimensional way to model your users. It utilizes a large breadth of data. So you'll see within the platform, you are able to customize the data that you select for your model. But most importantly, your options are, 1, all of the non-branded data within the Lookalike marketplace. 2, all of your first-party data assets, so anything owned by you as the client. And 3, any second-party data that is licensed to you, so data that's shared to you for your use. Most importantly, how often does that model refresh? So if you get a lookalike model out there in the ecosystem and 30 days later it still hasn't been refreshed, you no longer have a useful lookalike model. That's why it's important for this to be constantly updating, and with the Datacratic models within the BlueKai user interface, the model is refreshed every day to make sure you're targeting the latest mix of your best lookalike users. And last but not least, customizable thresholds. So it's important for you as the buyer to be able to dictate how you want to use your lookalike model. Do you need it to scale so you can reach the maximum amount of people possible? Do you need it to be the most precisely targeted initiative that you have on your media plan? All of those options are possible. We'll show you how you can tailor that yourself within the user interface. Thank you. And with that, let's turn to James for a little bit of the expertise behind lookalike modeling from the side of Datacratic.
Thanks, Molly. So I wanted to start off, some of this is going to reiterate a little bit what Molly just talked about, but I think that I wanted to leave the audience with the sort of top 5 questions that they should be asking of their modeling partners and asking of people who are producing or creating lookalike models for them. And so, you know, the first question just becomes simply operational. How do they operationalize the model? How do they get the data into their system? In the case of BlueKai and using Datacratic system, that data is already there. The integration is already full and complete. One of the most important aspects are the sources of data. Now, the big advantage to BlueKai customers in this case is that they have already gone through a very long vetting process of getting their data into the BlueKai platform and the protections and security systems that are available around that. And they also, of course, trust BlueKai, who has a very, very strong reputation in terms of third-party data. So you know exactly where all of the data is coming from, and that all of that data is privacy compliant, and that it's coming and developed from reputable sources. A third question to ask and to think about from a modeling perspective is, you know, do the models leverage the time series or the behavior sequencing? In other words, do they take each attribute or behavior and look at it across a multidimensional time space or a temporal space? It's very, very important when you're trying to predict the probability of somebody becoming a buyer or a booker, is to understand what is the time series of the behaviors that led up to that event. How visible is the black box? Do marketers and advertisers have the ability to see inside the black box and really understand what's going on? And the fifth one kind of applies also to the statement that Molly made around model refreshes, which is, you know, is there actual adaptive AI and machine learning going on? Or is the system just based on a simple decision tree logic? So in the case of Datacratic, our system will retrain the model every day. So as new converters come in or new bookers come in, the system learns, you know, what is that sequence of behavioral events that caused that booking or caused that conversion to happen, and how can we apply that learning, or how does the system apply that learning to accurately predict other users who are likely to book or convert. And then, of course, at the end, you know, really understanding there's a lot of modeling companies out there and a lot of machine learning companies that really don't have a lot of domain expertise in marketing technology, and so we think that's a big advantage in terms of working with Datacratic and BlueKai. So I'm going to step you through now the process that actually occurs, you know, when a model request has been sent through the BlueKai user interface. You know, what does the Datacratic system actually do? Now, all of this happens in real time, or certainly in a few milliseconds. So I'm going to kind of walk you through this process and break it apart a bit for you. So the very first step is, you know, filtering and eliminating any segments that could be biased, or if the quality of the segment is in question. Bias is really important, and an example of that is if you have a user that hits the landing page but not the conversion page, then that user is highly likely to convert and would be assigned a very high probability score. The problem is you don't need a modeling system to tell you that. You already know that, and most marketers, or certainly a lot of marketers, are already doing retargeting. So Datacratic system, for example, will automatically remove the retargeting segment from consideration of the model. It then starts to look for various signals within the data set that are indicative of conversion or that are indicative of the probability of conversion. And that's what starts to contribute to assigning that probability score. Once it identifies those signals, a process sort of called feature engineering starts to take place. So those signals are broken out into a three-dimensional vector space so that the time series becomes very apparent, as I mentioned earlier, and the vectors become very, very apparent to the algorithms or the classifiers, so to speak. So the next step in model training is, by the time the data makes it to that step, it's been cleaned and verified. All of the bias segments have been removed. The key signals or key predictive attributes have been identified, and those attributes have been engineered in a way that the classifiers and the actual model itself can train on them and learn from them very, very quickly. Once those steps are done, you have a model that's fully trained, ready for production. Datacratic system will also automatically backtest that model, so it saves a little bit of data, and it will run the model across some saved data to understand, is the model actually predicting? So imagine, if you offered up an audience of 10,000 converters for the model to learn from, it'll save, let's say, 1,000 of them or 2,000 of them. Once the model's been trained, it'll score those users, and the model itself will start to understand if it's being accurate or not. Once that step is complete, then the model will be applied to, in most cases, the entire BlueKai population, so it can score all 350 odd million, for example, all 350 million US cookies in BlueKai's platform. The model could also be used to score only cookies from a specific publisher. So as Molly was talking about earlier, if you partnered up with a publisher and you're using their second-party data to feed the model, then that model would only be used to score those cookies, and you can understand for a specific publisher who is most likely to convert. Then the whole thing repeats every 24 hours, and the audiences, the threshold that you've chosen, if it's top 1%, if you really are looking for high predictability, or maybe it's top 20% if you're looking for more scale, that audience just shows up in your BlueKai user interface, and it's available for you to target across display, email, or any of the other channels that you use today. So Molly is going to walk you through a demo of the BlueKai system, and I am going to pass it on to her to sort of talk about getting started and how easy it is.
Great, thank you. So basically, you just heard from James on what happens in between the time when you request a model and then it comes back to you. And like he said, that's all happening in seconds, milliseconds, very quick processes in terms of the model learning. And now we'll show you sort of what you see as a client. How do you interact with it? Make sure you see how easy it is to use the tools and customize it the way you want. So you should be able to see the BlueKai UI. I'll be looking today specifically at the two major steps to requesting a Datacratic lookalike model. And with that, I'll start with step one, which is configuring the model learning settings for how you want. So here I'm in our vendor screen, the starting point within BlueKai's platform where you work with any vendor you work with. I'm going to create new, and then you'll see that I have the option of creating a lookalike vendor. And within that, I'm going to select Datacratic as a lookalike vendor. And here in my vendor configuration, I can specify the settings for Datacratic. And so let's say I'm a retail client and my goal is to have a tablet purchaser model created for me. In this case, as I'm a retail client, I'm going to name this my name, Client X, and then I'll just call it lookalike configuration. This name can be anything you want it to be. Really, it's about your team being able to use the data and use the lookalike modeler as you like. Within here, the most important step that I will take is configuring the data that the model can learn on. So if I click on Add a new vendor profile, you'll see I'm given the rights and privileges to dictate if I want it to learn on just third-party data, just first-party data, just second-party data or any of the combinations therein. For example, if I pop open third-party data, you'll see I have the options to select other types of data providers, and I can specify that list. In most cases, we recommend that you go with the default profile, which includes all of the data. To James's point, the more data that the model can learn on, the better it is for the success of your model and for the outcomes of the predictive users. So for the case of this example, I'm going to go ahead and leave it at the default profile and click Save. You see I'm already done with step 1. So from here, I'm now going into Manage, and I will go to Manage My Models. And this is the part at which I'm actually going to go to that tablet initiative I may have and request a tablet purchaser's model. Now, I could do this for any of the initiatives I have live right now. So being a retail client in this example, I may have an individual model for multiple product lines or goals, campaigns, initiatives that I have running right now. In this case, I'm going to create that tablet model. I'm going to call it my tablet purchasers Lookalike model. And here I'm able to select any audience that's within my Bluekai platform. So again, for anyone who's less familiar with Bluekai, this can be any category or audience that's ingested from your site, from your offline data set, or any other data that you have access to via the Bluekai platform. In this case, I'm going to grab the tablet purchasers. It's an audience of people who have already purchased tablets on my site. Once I select it, I enter my first check to make sure I have enough reach. You'll see that it's going to calculate the amount of users in that audience. Lookalike models are best performed on audiences with about 5,000 users or more, so I've more than satisfied this configuration. And I'm going to pick the vendor that I previously configured. You see it's already ready for me in the UI. And then I have a couple options for customization. At this point, if I wanted to be, I could be done. This is now a ready to send off model. That said, I want to make some customization to the Lookalike model I'm requesting, so it's right for my business needs. The customizations I can make are I can choose the vendor profile. So for example, in that previous step, had I selected to just create a model on first-party data only, I would be able to select that here. I can choose the model categories format. So it's going to come back as a category that I can target within my Bluekai platform. And by default, I'm going to get 3 categories back: the top 1%, the top 1 to 5%, and the top 5 to 10% of that Lookalike model. That's the top buckets as stack ranked by Datacratic technology. In this case, I may opt to create a different type of model. We have some standard options for you. So for one instance, we have extreme performance. This is for those niche targeting folks who want only the very top 0.01% of the model, and maybe they'll extend out from there. This gives you additional granularity at the top of that Lookalike model, so you have the very most niche users possible. Another option is scale. So we have many customers who say, if I am seeing success here, I will scale this infinitely. And to be able to do that, you can ask for additional buckets beyond that 5 to 10%, for 10 to 15, 15 to 20, as far as you want it to go. And so that's also where the custom option comes in. If I haven't shown you something that's exactly how you would like your Lookalike model categories, you can choose custom and do a write-in yourself. This is all about customizing to make sure it's exactly right for your business needs. We wanted to give you some standard options, and of course, you can customize further. And then last but not least, we do give you an optional option to exclude from the model. So this goes back to James' example of the training session, where perhaps you have, before I hit my tablet purchase page, I have a landing page that everyone goes through. Obviously, that's going to look predictive, and it's not going to necessarily mean that it's a highly predictive attribute of the users who are going to buy my tablets. I may choose to remove that category ID such that it's just removed from the learning data set. This is something that's often caught in the model training. As you saw, there is a step for it regardless, but I may want to just speed up the process by calling this out ahead of time since I'm aware of it. And last but not least, standard labels and notes, as with every workflow within the Bluekai UI. Once I hit save, I'm now done. So I'm taken to my Manage Models screen, where I've just sent off this model, It's currently in sent state. So I have the insight that DataCredit has received the model, or it's going over to DataCredit to receive it, I should say. As soon as they've got it and they're working on it, it'll switch over to creating state. And then when it's ready for me to use, it'll switch into active. So I now have full transparency into that process. It typically takes a couple days to a week. And when I come back in and see that that model is active, I'll know that it's ready to be targeted. The other way that I'll know is I'll come into my UI and I will see that I have a custom model. And let's look at this example model where I've gotten it but for the scaled approach, as we saw in those lectures before. And so this is an example of a model that has been sent out, DataCredit has crunched through it, and it's come back now. And so that's it for the demo. I hope everyone was able to see how quick and easy it is with a lot of tailoring options for you should you choose to take advantage of them. The goal being make it quick and easy and give you the most customized lookalike model for your business. With that, I'm going to hand it back so we can return to the deck for the remainder of the presentation. Great. All right, so now you know how DataCredit turns through a model. You know how you would come into the platform to request a model. Now you need to know, do we have proven success with those models? And so we wanted to share a couple case studies of success with you where we have seen it consistently that our customers who have tested out lookalike models are seeing performance improvements across the board for a couple different metrics. So here we'll start with a case study that's a leading software retailer on the Lookalike DMP platform. This software retailer does a bunch of targeting and uses a variety of partners to be able to increase their ROI via their sales. And they actually do have a sale that's completed online. So to create their lookalike model, they modeled those users that were completing the sale. The lookalike model was then implemented within the media plan initially with one small test partner. And the results of that lookalike model were they saw a 118% lift in ROI for the lookalike model targeting. And so that was particularly good because this campaign actually was doing very well in and of itself. It had a 54% ROI overall, but the lookalike model was able to excel far and away above, about 64% better than the average. For another case study to look at a different type of vertical and a different type of metric, we also have a telecom customer who frequently uses lookalike models for their metric, which is to increase traffic yield. This telecom customer uses traffic yield as their metric for all of their media campaigns to determine success. They consistently use lookalike models, and in this case, it's particularly effective for a consistent period of time. In Q4 2013, it was 30% above their traffic yield goal, and in Q1 2014, it was also 40% above the goal. So a consistent track record of finding users who will stay longer on the page and have a stronger traffic yield than the typical campaign average. So a nice contrast to the approach of the online sale where you're able to take a lookalike model and create it on purchasers and see ROI impacted, as well as being able to take a lookalike model, find qualified browsers or users to come to the site and do their product research, and also improve their traffic yield.
That was great, Molly. Thank you very much. And so, just to reiterate the fact that one of the big problems that modeling really solves is taking this huge amount of disparate data. Bluekai's platform, I believe, has something like 40 to 50,000 different attributes in it. Many of their clients and their first-party taxonomies have even more than that. And so simply that becomes way too much data and way too much analysis for human beings to undertake, and in order to find out, which of those data attributes are actually resulting in conversions and which of those data attributes should they be targeting. So one of the big advantages of using a machine learning-based system like ours is that we can make, or the system can make sense of those attributes can understand which of those attributes are actually predictive of the outcome, and more importantly, can understand which combination of attributes. As Molly mentioned earlier, it's a multivariate system, so which combination of all of those attributes as they occur over a time series are actually predictive. And so it really, really helps to solve that big data challenge for marketers, and really helps marketers understand how to extract real value from the data that they're capturing in their BlueKai platform. And so I talked earlier about looking into the black box and understanding the behavior. These graphs are fairly internal. We don't typically share them as a matter of course with as part of the UI, for example. But we are offering for clients who do choose to work with BlueKai and get started and have a small minimum spend threshold that will actually devote some time. And you can spend an hour with one of our data scientists, one of our machine learning specialists, really understand the conversion cycle for your particular objective, and really understand how that combination of attributes starts to take shape. In some cases, it can be a few hours before the conversion. In other cases, it might be a few days. And really, really get some deep, deep insight into how Datacratic's system is using that data and how the system turns that data into predictive scores and how it applies those scores to your users. And so I think I want to leave you again just to remind you of sort of the top 5 things that you should be thinking about when selecting a modeling partner. The integration, of course, with your data system is extremely important. The fact that working through BlueKai and working with Datacratic through BlueKai means you don't have to deploy any additional pixels. Everything that you've done to activate data in the BlueKai platform is already relevant. The trusted data sources, of course, is extremely important. Using the time series, visibility into the black box, as I just referred to earlier, and applying adaptive machine learning, so actual artificial intelligence, and learning over time, which data attributes are actually causing conversion, and ensuring that the models get smarter and smarter and better at making predictions. Getting started is very, very easy. You don't have to work directly with Datacratic. You can simply call your BlueKai account manager, and they can walk you through the process and get started right away.
Great. Thank you, Molly and James. This is a really fascinating category, and it's really great to see how seamless it is for platform customers to now leverage this modeling technique right out of the BlueKai interface. So thank you for covering that today. So now we're going to move to the Q&A from our audience. As a reminder, you can submit your questions via the questions area of the GoToWebinar console. And to jumpstart this, I actually have a question for Molly. Do I need to work with Datacratic separately for contracts and billing?
That's a great question. You do not. So when you're using a lookalike model within the BlueKai platform, everything comes through BlueKai. As you saw, the lookalike workflow is certainly within BlueKai, and any money exchange comes through BlueKai as part of your standard contract.
Great. And what do I need to get started with in regards to seed data?
I'll take that one. So seed data, as we define it, is the data that goes into the model. So I think that's what this question is pointing to in this case. How do you get the seed data ready to get this lookalike modeling process going? With BlueKai, very easy. As anyone who already has a DMP, you have your seed data. It's all of your categories. For anyone interested in starting the process, we just have to put a tag down, categorize your data. You can do that as part of a DMP, and we can talk to you about other options as well. Once you have the data in categories, it's all set to go through the workflow that I just showed you.
Great. And it looks like I have one here for James. Is my data safe? James,
Yes,
can you walk through
that's a great question as well. Absolutely. So the same security constraints and controls that are in place with BlueKai also apply to the Datacratic integration. So you can really think of it as one platform. Our software is deployed in the same servers, more or less, as BlueKai software. And so the data is sent into our system using a unique hash, or security hash, and it's sent back into BlueKai's system using the exact same security hash. So Datacratic can't even unhash the data and can't interpret it for any other use other than to send it back to BlueKai. So there's complete security and complete privacy compliance.
Thank you.
And I think we had other questions come in as well. I think somebody had asked about, again, why was the retargeting segment removed? And just to put that in context, I was using that as an example. What the system does is removes any segment that it thinks will bias the model. And so in the case of a converter lookalike model, the retargeting segment or the retargeting attribute would severely bias the model, because anyone who hits the retargeting page is very, very likely to ultimately convert, but you don't need a model to tell you that. Now, the user went on to ask, can you create a model of a retargeting audience? And the answer is yes, absolutely. In fact, in some of the client examples where they've used the retargeting audience as the seed segment and then created a model of that audience, the modeled audience has performed almost as well, and in some cases as well, as the retargeting audience. So it's a great way to expand your retarget audience, for sure.
Great, and we have the next question regarding, in the UI, we were showing percentages, and it looks like they would like some clarification on how we're measuring top performers.
Absolutely. So when Datacratic takes the lookalike model, and James can certainly add color commentary here, when they're performing their technology, what they're doing is they're stack ranking all of the available users with a score based on how much they look like your desired model, right? So if you've asked for a model on converters, they're stack ranking the entire population based on how much that population or that user looks like a converter. The reason we display it as percentages is you're then able to get groupings of that stack rank. So your top 1% is the very top scored users. The top 1 to 5% is the users that follow directly after that, and so on and so forth. Does that make sense?
That's correct, Molly. And I'll add to that the probability score that Datacratic's system assigns to the user is based on how much more likely than the average are they to be a converter or to be a booker or whatever that seed audience, whatever that initial seed audience was. So the probability scores are assigned based on how much more likely than the average BlueKai user is that particular user to be a member of that seed audience. We also had a question come in about can lookalike audiences be used for targeting video advertising instead of display advertising? And it's a great question, and the question is absolutely yes. The audience themselves can be used for activation in any of your delivery channels. So whether that's display, video, social, email, however you're using BlueKai audiences today, you can use modeled lookalike audiences in exactly the same way.
Thank you. I have another question here, and we're going to take two more here. Can you elaborate on the third-party data that is used? Molly?
Sure. So within the BlueKai platform, we have about 40,000 categories across 700 million users of what we call third-party data. Third-party data to us is the data marketplace. It's data providers who have opted to sell data within BlueKai. Sometimes you'll see this purchased as perhaps a telecom customer might buy in-market retail cell phones and plans, and that would be an example of a third-party attribute. In this case, we're using that attribute and the nearly 40,000 others to be able to score the users. So based on all of the actions that they've taken across that whole third-party data set, And today we're able to do that with all of our non-branded data within the BlueKai UI.
Great, thank you. And James, I believe this one is for you. How can we see inside the black box and understand exactly what the model is doing?
So yeah, thank you. That was what I referred to towards the end of the presentation, and you can talk to your BlueKai account management rep. And what we're offering is for marketers who get started with lookalike modeling. To start it off, you can actually spend an hour with one of our machine learning specialists and we'll produce a number of sort of charts and graphs for you to really help you understand how the algorithms are, first of all, understanding the makeup of your core audience, and second of all, understanding which of those attributes are predictive of a person becoming a member of your core audience, so a member of your conversion segment or a member of your retargeting segment, whatever you happen to be using as the seed. So there's a lot that we can do sort of offline to give you insight into that. And as a company, we're committed to being very, very transparent to let you know exactly what's going on within the algorithmic decisioning process.
Great, thank you. We're getting a ton of really good questions. So my next one is, what happens when the seed is poorly defined and lacks signals? Maybe you guys can tag team on that one. Molly first.
Sure, that's a great question. We have that question come up all the time. To start off, I'd say the best seed that we see is the most simple. So if you want people to buy, you should select buyers as the seed of your lookalike model, so on and so forth. You obviously can do a ton of customization. We enable any audience for that, but we do recommend you keep it simple and straightforward. If you point it at the goal, you'll have the most success of hitting the goal, is what we found. That said, if you do get further along the path and you are to a point where either maybe A, you're trying to make a decision, or B, maybe you feel you've gone and requested a different audience for your lookalike model, there's a couple points at which we can help you. Number one is BlueKai account management is always happy to discuss strategy and be able to recommend the best practice lookalike model, get involved with how you might be approaching that. And number two is, if you've gone so far, you've already requested the model and perhaps it's not working as expected, we always recommend that after 2 weeks after launching the model, you take a look at the performance data. So is it getting the click-through rate, the conversion rate, whatever you're measuring on that you expect? And at that point is another good check-in with your BlueKai account manager. If it's not hitting that point by then, it's a good time to look back at what was in the model, and we have a standard set of questions we can walk through with you to make sure you've got the right model in play. James, anything to add with that regarding the seed?
I think that was a really good answer. I think that, definitely it's a matter of, the more users in the seed segment, the better. But we're always constantly working and on tuning the system so that I can deal really, really well with smaller audiences. So if somebody has a question about it, I think that what Molly recommended and what we concur with, of course, is sort of a minimum of 5,000 users in the seed segment, or sorry, a minimum of 5,000 who've entered that seed segment within the last 30 days. That's a good rule of thumb. But if you have 4,000, then by all means reach out to your BlueKai account manager. They can check with us on the back channel as well, and we can have a look at that seed segment. If there's a lot of attributes available on those 4,000 users, then it might be fine. So if you're in that range and you're not sure, I would definitely recommend checking with your BlueKai account manager, and we'd be more than happy to take a look at it for you.
Great, and I'm going to call this the last one, even though there are many more good ones. Will your reporting show how the data sources perform against other data sources?
So
I'll take that.
Okay, sure. You go ahead.
The short answer is typically you want to use this in conjunction. So I'll let James talk a little bit more about the reporting that they're able to give you for insight into how the model's compiled and some of those effects. At the end of the day, once the model's compiled, it just becomes another targeting segment, albeit your own custom targeting segment. And at that point, it should flow into your regular standard media planning and reporting processes. So at that point, you'll have a targeting line item, you'll associate that with a placement, and then through your standard reporting, you'll be able to see the standard metrics by which you are judging your media campaign. we often engage with you on analyzing those metrics, just because we're very committed to making sure you're seeing success from your targeting initiatives, but it is something you absolutely will have completely within your purview at that point.
Anything to add to that, James?
No, I think that's great. I think, you know, again, as part of the program that we're offering today and the sort of special incentive to get started, we'd be happy to walk people through at a bit of a deeper level some of the reports that we can produce internally and really let them know how the algorithms are interpreting their data. But Molly's answer was perfect. I think taking that seed audience and using the existing very powerful analytical tools within BlueKai's platform can give you a lot of insight into it.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. In the interest of time, we're going to wrap it up. Thanks for joining us today, and thank you to Molly and James for sharing their expertise on lookalike modeling. We hope this has been an informative session for you. And again, feel free to reach out to your account managers if you have additional questions or on more details on getting started. The entirety of the webcast will be available on demand, which you will receive via email.